Good afternoon, folks. I want to welcome you to our webinar today. It is understanding the ins and outs of Programmatic for PPC. My name is Brian Gaynor. I'm an account manager here at Hannafin Marketing, and I'm also a regular PPC hero blogger. Today, I'm joined by Pete Kim, founder and CEO of MightyHive, a programmatic services vendor based out of the Bay Area. Pete, welcome to PPC Hero today.
Thank you very much.
It's great to have you. So today, folks, if you want to join in the conversation on Twitter, please remember to include the hashtag ThinkPPC in all your tweets. Or we also have a webinar question box where you can submit questions that either me or Pete will answer at the end of our presentation today. And just a little intro about who Hannafin Marketing are. We're the agency behind the world's most popular PPC blog, PPC Hero, and we also are the organizers of the biggest PPC conference in the world, HeroConf. This April we'll be in Los Angeles for HeroConf, and you check out more at www.heroconf.com. You get to meet all your favorite PPC heroes as well as many industry experts. I'll also be talking about programmatic more in depth for PPC managers. So if you guys enjoy this webinar today, we can definitely have a lot more content for you at that. Also, Hannafin Marketing, we are one of the biggest PPC agencies in the US. We manage and optimize multiple global paid search, paid social, and display programs. And within 12 months, brands can expect up to a 250% increase in their growth trajectory. And just a little look to some of the clients we have the pleasure of working with on a daily basis. They range from multiple verticals, including travel, B2B, lead gen, to e-commerce. And Pete, now just to pass over to Pete, who will introduce MightyHive and what they offer to advertisers today. And I'll pass over to Pete.
Absolutely. MightyHive is a programmatic solutions provider, which basically means that we provide everything you need to build a world-class programmatic media organization, not only access to the tools and the technologies, but also, the training and the consulting, and as well as our own product and dev tools that we use in order to just make sure that everything is really running efficiently. We have been growing rapidly. We've got offices in San Francisco, New York City. We've opened our first office in Asia, in Sydney, Australia, and we have more offices coming this year, Singapore, London, and Toronto. So we're definitely finding a great demand for folks out there who really want to build a programmatic media team and can use these services that MightyHive provides in order to do so.
Great, thank you, Pete. So just moving on, we have a quick poll question for you guys. I just want to know, how much experience do you have with programmatic? Is it less than 1 year, 1 to 3 years, 3 to 5 years, or 5+ years? So Pete, how long have you been in programmatic in your career?
Well, 10 years now, and so I guess you could say I was in programmatic before it was called programmatic. And so my first gig in online advertising was really as a product manager at Yahoo, where I oversaw the Smart Ads program, and one of the products that we released was the first US-based dynamic retargeting programs. And so when I'm giving speeches in public to, sort of just a general consumer crowd, I'll always say things like, oh, do you know those ads where you take a look at the red shoes and you don't buy them, but they follow you around for a month? That's, at least partially my fault, so I humbly apologize. And I was there for a few years, and then I went to Google for a few more, and my last role at Google was running worldwide business development for the DoubleClick stack. And then back in 2012, we founded MightyHive, and that was about 4.5 years ago. And so it's been, quite a ride since then.
Great, yeah, sounds like a lot of experience and a lot of trial and error and fun times of trying to figure things out.
Yeah, it absolutely has been. And it's been, I honestly believe that advertising and online marketing is one of the most fascinating industries in the world right now, both because of the impact that it has and will have and how fast it's changing.
Exactly, and that's sort of one thing that keeps us going at here at Hannah. It's a non-stop. You're always learning something new every single day, and it's definitely a exciting time to be in the industry. So just we've had a couple of honor answers come in from the poll, and I'll say the majority of people have less than a year experience or even no experience with programmatic. So hopefully this webinar will be definitely beneficial to at least get you started or have a better understanding of what programmatic is moving forward. So Pete, I think just going through the agenda today, we'll be covering a lot of high-level stuff in terms of what programmatic is, why PPC managers should be looking to programmatic to not replace, but to supplement their PPC efforts as well as their overall online marketing strategy. We'll be looking at the differences between the types of service that are out there, types of support options, and how that balances with the importance of the technology behind the programmatic vendors. And then we look at how you guys as PPC experts and PPC managers can look to programmatic to slowly take that step into these strategies and where we can where things can go from there. So Pete, I think the biggest question is based on people's experience, and programmatic has been a buzzword now for a few years, and I think the biggest question is, or the biggest problem is, people don't really understand what it is. They have a fair idea, but can you explain what is programmatic to you for someone who's been in the industry as long as you have?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that first we should just acknowledge that any confusion that might be out there is completely justified. The programmatic and the ad tech market generally has been almost chaotic in its messaging for the last 10 years, and there's just a lot of things going on. And so I think that the first thing that you should acknowledge when talking about what is programmatic is just acknowledge that the term itself, programmatic, has evolved over the years. And when it first came out, it was really just kind of this notion of this another synonym for real-time bidding, which started for remnant inventory in the display space, and the notion that you could have a bidder and that the person could buy an impression with a bid and an auction that takes place in under 100 milliseconds. And then from there, it's really kind of gradually evolved. And today, I would say that programmatic is best described as a methodology rather than any specific technology like real-time bidding or exchange-based buying or anything like that. And to me, really, programmatic is describing the shift that we're seeing in online advertising and really advertising in general, right, towards from managing many direct one-to-one relationships, whether that be, a search agency and a display agency and a TV agency, to really kind of centralizing all of those things into a central environment where you can look at things holistically. And this is being driven not only by sort of the opportunity that's being created in the marketplace, but also really from consumer demand. Because in this, increasingly integrated world, consumers expect the advertising and the messaging and the content to be relevant and integrated and similar across devices. And so that means that we also have to message to them in the same way. Actually, if you could go back on one of those, that slide, I think that one slide. There
Yep.
you go. I think that, the point that I'll make here is that there's some real hallmarks that you can see, which is that, the methodology has hallmarks like being real-time and dynamically optimized, transparent, data-driven, and efficient. And the point that I'll make here is that many of these ideas were actually first pioneered in the world of PPC, so it should be very familiar to the folks out in PPC land as they kind of get into programmatic. And when we have chats with some of those folks, it's like, oh, you know what? This is the way that we've been doing it for years, and I guess in some ways it's the rest of advertising catching up.
Yeah, and I totally agree, and that's sort of been how I entered into programmatic. Started 3 years ago, coming from a PPC background, and I started a new agency, and they just basically told me, "Here you go. It's a lot of the same principles, and once you get in and you play around in DSPs, you figure out it's the same process from day to day. the philosophy behind it is the same. You plan, you predict, you analyze, and you make changes as necessary. So I definitely think when you break it down and look at even just how the auction is based, we see here on the graphic, it's very similar to the GDN, just with an extra maybe layer or two, and I think it's something that maybe a lot of our attendees today will have a lot of experience with, and a lot of already prior knowledge too.
Cool.
So I think the next thing is why should PPC managers be aware of programmatic? Again, it's been a buzzword for a while, but it's now then to a point where pretty much majority of the ads you see online now, or display ads online, you are being bought programmatically. They're expecting by the end of the year to see about 78% of all display being bought programmatically in one way or another. And from other sources I've read, its display is actually going to outspend search by the end of the year. So, as someone who works at a PPC agency, that's a huge deal to start considering as you make plans for 2017 and even 2018 to where you want to move your training resources, move your own internal knowledge, and planning as well. Pete, do you have any thoughts on how things are looking right now?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that, the big question here was why programmatic? And certainly the eye-popping numbers that you see here, 82% of, all display going to be purchased programmatically by the end of next year. I mean, it's crazy, but it just really speaks to the power of this stuff. And so obviously there's something going on here. But I also want to really hit on the idea that I mentioned before, which is that in this world of integration, right? I do believe that folks will have to be cross-trained in order to serve their clients well, right? And in a world where one agency does have to do many, many, many different things and be experts in many things, right? It's for the PPC folks, you got to learn the programmatic in order to provide a full suite of services to clients who will expect that.
Yeah, and I totally agree, and that's something we've been seeing internally as our clients have gotten smarter about the whole ecosystem as well. They've started asking us questions, and that's what's prompted us to start training internally, talking about things more rather than just farming out to vendors and other services. We've started talking about those internal conversations and how we can train ourselves and be a full service agency for media buying as opposed to just paid search or just paid social.
Totally.
So we all know programmatic is out there. It's not going to change. It's not going to stop. It's going to continue to grow. But there's still challenges. I know from my past, I've worked with smaller budgets. I've worked with bigger budgets. How do advertisers get past the challenges out there or past the perceived gateway or walled gardens that are out there?
Yeah, I think that the real point that I think should be made with this slide is that, number one, programmatic has been for a long time, the domain of very large companies, right? Because of the complexity and frankly, because a limited amount of people that actually knew how to do this stuff. And so, just in an optimization problem, those folks will go serve the largest clients first. But as we've seen programmatic really kind of shift dramatically upwards, it's gotten more and more attention from the mid-market. And really, there's a challenge and an opportunity here. And the things that I really want to point out is that today, especially in the mid-market and, even, frankly, even at the high end of the market, the bottleneck is not a lack of software. One look at, an infamous slide called the Lumascape, which shows literally thousands of companies in the ad tech space, should convince anyone that there's no lack of software. The true bottleneck is actually the services, the people that know how to do this type of stuff. And that's what MightyHive really is out there to try and help address. That being said, one of the great reasons, in addition to kind of go programmatic and to think about it, is that like in PPC, programmatic, because it's very democratic in that there's just an auction and anybody can compete with anybody, and so it's a real opportunity in the world of display and other types of media for sort of smaller organizations to compete head to head and win against larger organizations.
Yeah, I totally agree. It definitely has, like I said, I've worked with small budgets and be able to compete on the same levels of their million-dollar counterparts and drive results. Uh, even compared to just using GDN, we've seen great results by testing programmatic strategies, making small changes here and there. So definitely a there is great opportunities for those mid market budgets as well as even smaller budgets. But as you said, just that skills gap is where a lot of people are losing out just because they're having to pay a premium for better service, and I think it's definitely something that us in the industry as we continue to learn about it more, will definitely fill that gap sooner rather than later. You mentioned
Absolutely.
how you've been in the industry for around 10 years. In the grand scheme, that's a very short amount of time, and I think the next slide explains it how quickly programmatic has come to the fore. We look at like 1995's when online advertising, as we kind of know it today, started. Do we want to talk a bit to how you've seen the industry grow and evolve over the last 10 years?
Absolutely. And I think that, this is a fascinating slide because it really does a good job of kind of summing up like all the different things that have been happening on the technology as well as just on the services layer. Remember, if you're going to do anything, you have to have both the tools and the people. And I think that from the people side of things, the services, right, you can see how we started out with ad networks, but then we really saw the rise of this notion of the agency trading desk. And there's a fascinating, kind of story about what happened there. But the short version is that, inside of the large advertising holding companies, the WPPs and the Omnicoms and the Publicis of the world, each of them created the model that emerged was the creation of one kind of trading desk that would do all of the programmatic media buying for the hundreds of agencies inside of inside of the kingdom known as WPP or the kingdom known as Omnicom, etc. And there have been some fairly public and, to be frank, embarrassing revelations recently about what's been going on in the business practices associated with that. And that's led to the rise of independent trading desks that are a bit more transparent and honest in the way that they do their business. And, and none of this is some of those things it was unfortunate because the programmatic technologies and the methodologies themselves were actually amazing. But then, from a service model standpoint, there was really some challenges about how the players that were operating at the time chose to kind of run that business. And then so now we're starting to see, with the independent trading desks that are out there, and then now we're starting to really see it kind of go in-house. And from the perspective of in-house, it's really kind of in-house in two different ways, right? It's just like, I'm an agency and I don't want to use an outside trading desk to do this. I just want to do it myself. And even taking that a step further is that even some advertisers are just saying, you know what? We're just going to kind of build our own in-house agency in effect and just do it completely ourselves. And so we're starting to really see that in our business. We help both agencies and advertisers. If you want to build a programmatic media organization, we can help.
Yeah, and I think that's a very great point. I think a lot of people, especially people who maybe not be as experienced in digital as even PPC managers, go into a traditional programmatic vendor where you're not sure, or into an ad network or a trading desk, you're not sure what your money is actually getting you. I think for me, I think that's been the biggest cloud that's hung over programmatic is, it seems shady, it seems that it's overpriced, and when realistically, it's as good as, if not better um, than what people perceive it to be. So I think the next slide sort of breaks down the traditional models that you see on the marketplace right now. You have your ad networks where you just go by at a flat CPM rate, and they give you a certain amount of impressions for your budget. The same with trading desks. It varies based on the tactics you want to use. And like I know from previous, you don't know really where your money is going, because if they're charging a flat rate, you could potentially see, you don't know what they're bidding in relation to what you're paying, to be able to see the quality of the inventory, where your ads are showing, how good the tactics actually are. Whereas with if you go directly with a DSP or a service like MightyHive, you start to see that transparency. And for me, that's been the biggest part, especially coming from a PPC background where we're so used to a plug and play method where you log into AdWords, create an account, and just go. And for our clients, they see the value, they'll see where the money's going and what they're spending and how things are performing. Is that something you've seen on a similar scale as you've seen the industry evolve?
Transparency is the future of programmatic, and it is very much clear that this is going to happen. I think that, on this slide, I think everybody pretty much knows how an ad network works. But in the trading desk world, what was going on was that, let's say that the agency that was client-facing would work with an internal trading desk inside of their holding company, and here's how the transaction would work. One of those trading desks might buy some media for, call it $100, and then they would, quote, sell it to the other agency for $300, and then that agency might even add some fees on top of that, and then sell it eventually to the end advertiser. And the problem with this was that they didn't disclose that jump from 100 to 300, and when they asked for transparency or an accounting of where the money was, it was like, no, we don't want to tell you that. And so this all really kind of came to a head last year when a group of the Association of National Advertisers, the ANA, which is like, basically the trade group that represents the largest advertisers in the known galaxy, commissioned an investigation from a private investigation firm called K2, and they released the K2 ANA report, and it basically described this type of, sort of these shenanigans. And so now, kind of every account is sort of been like, having some really hard questions being asked. And really, at the end of the day, that party is over. If you could call something that, I didn't think was great, a party in the first place. But now you're really kind of seeing, the rise of transparency, and that is what the PPC folks have had forever, which is just, an accounting. I want to know down to the last penny how my money was spent. And I want to be able to understand that, and I think that as the advertiser, I have that right, and you as the sort of service provider to me have that duty to disclose that.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's just for even a PPC standpoint, like what Google introduced a couple of years ago, that agents have to disclose to their clients, give them access to all their accounts to be able to give a full transparency, and I think it's definitely a good move for the industry, and it definitely takes that shroud of doubt away from programmatic as a whole, and even as display as a whole, it makes it a little bit more approachable for all advertisers, not just PPC people. So just using MightyHive as an example, I've worked with you guys multiple times at multiple different agencies, and the one thing I have valued is the transparency you guys have. This is just an example of what you guys offer to your clients, and if you want to explain a little bit more in depth of how you feel this is benefiting your clients as they work with you.
Sure. And so I think that generally speaking, this is once again going to get back to this notion that if you're interested in building a programmatic practice, MightyHive's a one-stop shop to kind of get you everything that you need. We're very, very closely partnered with Google and DoubleClick, who are by far the leaders in this space. And I think that, and you can actually see some of the interesting stats that have been coming out over the last few months, which is that in the last quarter and really kind of the last few quarters, virtually all of the growth inside of advertising has gone to two players, Google being one of them and Facebook being the other. And so it's very clear, especially inside of the programmatic portions of this, that Google is absolutely dominant, and we think that there's a reason for that. They've got the best products that are out there. We can talk more about the ecosystem there, but it's just, so we think that that's probably the best choice. And then, but just having access to those tools isn't enough. There's so many other things that must be done in order to successfully launch a practice. And MightyHive really takes pride in providing programmatic as a service because we can take an organization literally from a standstill into a full programmatic team, over the course of our work together. And so on day one, we can do everything for you. We can do the trading, and we can do the, all the campaigns and setups and so on and so forth. But then over time, what makes MightyHive different is that for our agency clients or for our advertising clients, we also have the ability to provide training, right? And we'll train you to do it yourselves. And then we'll eventually kind of let the hands on the keyboard from the agency or for whoever our client is, and they're kind of now on their own and asking us questions, and we provide expert advice and guidance on an ongoing basis. And some of the support that we can do in those worlds. I mean, I think everybody knows sometimes that it could be a little frustrating to kind of have a support ticket go to a email address like, I hope somebody reads this at support.google.com, or please somebody answer me at support.whatever. And so with working with MightyHive, it's you're actually just going to send an email to your dedicated person, and they'll get back to you quickly, and they are already up to speed on what you do and what kinds of clients, because they probably helped to set it up in the first place. And that kind of speed and that kind of accuracy just is awesome, because it just makes things so much easier. And there's a number of benefits. But anyway, I think that the programmatic service as a concept is both, sort of the access to the tools, as well as sort of from day one to day X. MightyHive can be your partner in making sure that you've got a successful programmatic effort underway.
Thank you. Yeah, I think for me, having access through a partner like MightyHive, it definitely has helped break down those walls to the programmatic ecosystem, which has been such a big brand, big budget war for so long. Like, as you can see with your guys' pricing, it's reasonable. It's compared to like going straight to a double click where you have high minimums, or other DSPs where you have high minimums as well, just to even get access to the platforms. And like you said, the transparency is there. You know exactly where your marketing dollars are going day after day, week after week. Do you want to talk a little bit more about the different levels of?
Yeah, actually, I kind of jumped the gun into talking on the last slide about this stuff, but I think it's here, right? It's just this notion of managed support and self. It's managed is our hands on the keyboards. We're doing it for you, and so you can kind of kick the tires and see if it's worth it. And then at the support tier, it's your hands on the keyboard, and we're kind of sitting shotgun and training you and helping you with the setups and making sure you don't accidentally spend $1 bajillion in 10 seconds, because that can happen. And then at self, you're an expert, and so you've got platform direct access, but we provide that support and even the systems integration and additional training as needed. And each of those tiers, these are our rack rates, if you will. And but I think that the great thing about MightyHive is that we can give you access to the world's leading tools, but without these crazy minimums or these insanely long commitments, right? Before you even have a chance to figure out, is this something that I want to do?
Yeah, and I think that it definitely made sense, especially coming from PPC expert, PPC standpoint, where you kind of know what's going on, you kind of know what to do, but there's all those extra little levers. Like, I know double click, and you look at the report, you look at the chart, you get down to even as granular as the specific device people are on, with the specific network that they're using as a service, and it's that extra layer of detail and training that's definitely helped me quickly learn programmatic over the last few years. And yeah.
Yeah, you know what? I feel like this is like what we're doing here is like this is almost turning into too much of a sales pitch for MightyHive. And like let's actually skip the next couple of slides and just like tell our audience like what actually is the options for someone coming from PPC, and let's like kind of give them some real things to do. Would that be okay?
Not a problem. Yeah, not a problem. So, like Pete said, there's a lot of options for programmatic for PPC managers. I mean, the first one, I think many of us, including me, I'm sure many of our attendees, the first thing that we always have engaged in is remarketing, whether it be through GDN or a remarketing specific platform. We've dipped our toes in programmatic, But there's definitely a lot more beyond what remarketing and what that lower in the funnel intent where programmatic can definitely play a part. Um, so, in your experience, what have you found has worked best, or where have you seen the biggest growth in what programmatic could do for advertisers?
Remarketing is absolutely the place to start. I mean, if you want to think about it, you really got to build from the transaction, and so PPC is such a high intent activity, and then remarketing is also harvesting that intent, and so. The notion of a funnel is a little bit outdated today, but it's still useful in saying that if you're going to be kind of looking at where your agency or where your next sort of project is going to be to offer to the client, I think it makes a lot of sense to build from what you know at the bottom of the funnel. PPC is definitely that, and then kind of build steadily and systematically upwards. And I think that as I mentioned earlier, I think that the expectation is going to be that the agencies of the future, or even the advertisers of the future, are going to want to have a single team that can do the whole darn thing, right? Not just the search or not just the lower intent stuff, but all of it eventually. But the question then becomes, where do you start? And the answer is, of course, right, with the next thing in front of you. And so if you're in the lower funnel, then remarketing is the next thing. And then after that, you move up into, kind of the mid-tier of that range, and then eventually into like the big dollars around branding and, sort of upper funnel types of activities. And so I think that as you're looking at that, and even after the transaction, you're looking at now the loyalty loop and the post-purchase experience, and how do you get people to do it again? And, there really is a lot of stuff. But no matter where you are on this set, I think that it's clear that in the long term, A, you're going to need to learn all of it, and B, right, the first step is the next obvious one that's right as close as possible to what you're already doing today.
Yeah, and I think that makes sense. I think Programmatic helps address the way the customer journey is changing as well. People have a lot, less of a sense of brand loyalty. It's more about how brands can serve them best. I think by gathering the data we can and utilizing third-party and second-party data to be able to integrate with um, with a media buying strategy, it helps address people at every stage of what we still call the funnel, but when realistically it helps us to just better serve our customers rather to advertise. We're trying to just better serve our customers the whole way through their entire journey.
Awesome.
So I think when we look at the options PPC managers currently have to leverage programmatic, also we have the GDN, which is price second nature to most of us who work in AdWords pretty much every day. Obviously, it has only access to the Doodle network and to the DoubleClick partner sites. But then on the opposite side, you have demand side platforms or DSPs such as like DoubleClick, which we talked about a little bit today, MediaMath, Turn, and we could go on with an entire list of with great DSPs. But I think the biggest benefit that DSPs have is it gives advertisers access to that external data, that second-party data, to be able to leverage the messaging and to sophisticate their strategies just a little bit more. Obviously, you have that added enterprise level fee, but at times you have that little bit more transparency when rather than use a managed service or a vendor where you're paying a set price. And I think the biggest thing is the inventory you have available. It's much more expansive. You have access to the Doodle networks, but you also have access to over 80 or 90 ad exchanges more, where you will end up finding the right piece of inventory at the right price for at the right moment for that customer in time. And if you look at a lot of placements, if some of you who use grocery, you go to a lot of sites, you'll see a lot of these different vendors such as OpenX, Rubicon, all have tags on these publishers' sites. So publishers are leveraging multiple different exchanges, and then the ads will eventually show to the right person on the right exchange. There's no specific exchange; it's based on the auction at that time. And just moving to like you mentioned, like each option has its own benefit and each uh, better performing things. You talked about a little bit how you've seen, say, GDN versus the demand, and what provides what different pros they both have.
Yeah, so I would say that, kind of in comparing A and B, which is, A on the GDN and B, which says demand side platforms here, but I would say, kind of more broadly, the general ad tech ecosystem. The things that jump out to me, I mean, some of the things you already said, which is like, obviously, the broader access to inventory and things like that. There's differences in pricing model. I mean, the Google Display Network is a network, right? And so they're definitely going to be bundling in some fees that may or may not be transparent to the end buyers. But I also think that there is really kind of something to be said for the amounts of flexibility and power in the tools. I like to think that the demand side platforms are the pro tools, right? These are the ones that are used by the largest advertisers in the world, the largest agencies in the world. It's kind of grown-up adult big boy tools, and that's not always the right call, by the way. There is a time and a place for tools that are a little bit more simple, and there's a time and a place for things that are more powerful but also carry the risk of mistakes. And so inside of the world of demand-side platforms and ad tech generally, they are more powerful, but that comes with a warning. In some cases, like if you don't know what you're doing, then it's enough rope to hang yourself with.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to put it. Like both have pros and definitely both have cons, and I think we've both probably experienced cons in programmatic just as much as we have in GDN and vice versa with pros. But I think the biggest thing is whatever platform you do use or choose to use it in the long run, I think as we move forward and get more sophisticated with campaigns, I think we look at towards a consolidation of where all our ads are, where all our campaigns are, and we start to see a lot of the big two or three start to do that. Obviously, Google have DVM, DoubleClick Bid Manager, DoubleClick Campaign Manager, and then DoubleClick for Search, which is a premium tool, but we're starting to see that slowly consolidate into one eventual network. And even looking at some of the features that are coming out in AdWords, you can see the gap closing. But then you look at Facebook, obviously with buying Atlas a couple of years ago and ramping that up and expanding their audience network. Microsoft buying LinkedIn. I think it's definitely going to be a race to see who can consolidate things first before we see a full, true solution that works for advertisers at every level. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that you broke up a little bit at the end. Could you repeat that last part of the question again?
So I think I was going to say it seems to be like a race amongst the big three, Google, Microsoft, and Facebook, to provide that one-stop solution. I think as we get
Yeah.
to more, I think it's definitely where things are
Yeah.
going.
So can you click over to the Lumascape slide just so that I think people can see the kind of chaos that
Yeah.
is going on in the market right now?
Let's see if I find it here real quick. There we go.
Okay. So I think that this is actually really interesting. And so let's kind of take a look and just acknowledge that this is almost anarchy in terms of what's going on here. And there are thousands of logos on this page. And if you want to think that each of them has raised 10 to 20 million dollars in venture capital, right? Sometimes vastly more, you can see very quickly that there's been tens of billions of dollars poured into this ecosystem because of the amount of money involved and the rewards for people who are winning. But I think that the thing that I want to kind of get to is this notion that I explained called FNAC, which is an acronym, FNAC, feature, not a company. And I think that when describing what's going on this, that these guys are really guilty of committing the sin of FNAC. So FNAC is basically this idea that just because something's useful doesn't mean that it deserves to be its own company. right? It's a matter of packaging. So for a great example of that is spam filters. 10, 15 years ago or whatever it was, there was a bunch of spam filtering companies that were out there that were standalone. But, spam filtering is an FNAC. It's a feature inside of Gmail or a feature inside of, whatever email service that you happen to use. And people didn't want to pick a separate, they just wanted it to work inside of the email system that they already had. And so really it was, that's a great example of how to kind of think about FNAC. I think this is a perfect example of FNAC going absolutely bananas. And so what would happen is, let's say that, instead of this, calling it the display LumaScape, let's say it was the automotive LumaScape, right? And what people want are cars. And I just want to, buy a car and drive it off the lot. And what this is in the world, to kind of use a metaphor to explain it, in today's world, if you want a car, what you have to do is you have to go to box number 1 and buy the steering wheel, and box number 2 and buy the tires and the engine and the brakes and the chassis, and then you have to lash it all together yourself in the garage, right? Or have your agency do it, and then you pray that the darn thing works. That doesn't make any sense. So I think that where we're going to be seeing, where we're going with this, is that there's going to be a really, really big consolidation in this industry, and all of these little pieces are going to just become and morph into car companies. And those car companies are going to be, provide full access platforms that allow you to buy any media, that allow you, to have all of these, the ad server and the DSP and the DMP and, all these other acronyms all lashed together. You don't have to know how the engine works. You just have to know how to drive. And really sort of the creation of this car is where we're going. And I do think that Facebook and Microsoft, and yes, absolutely Google, who's the clear leader right now, is going to be, are going to be those, quote, car companies of the future, providing those products and services to the agencies of the future.
Yeah, I think that makes total sense. Trying to evaluate different vendors, you run into a brick wall no matter what way you look at it. Each one has its pros, each one has its cons, and when you have 1,000 lit pros and 1,000 cons, it's hard to actually just settle on one. So I think it is definitely going to be to the benefit of the advertiser as opposed to just the companies as well. So yeah, thank you for a little bit more depth into that.
Yeah, today it's too confusing, right? And you'll get in, and somebody will, one of the sales folks from one of these companies will come in, and they'll be pitching their FNAT to you, and it'll be filled with just completely ridiculous jargon. And I think that the ultimate mistake that we've made is to kind of focus on these little individual feature sets as opposed to really understanding the needs and wants of the customer. And they just want a car. They just want something that works, a programmatic solution that is comprehensive, and you don't have to understand the guts of it. You didn't have to assemble it. It just works right out of the box.
Yeah, and I think that makes I think that it's definitely a good perspective on things and how we can look to the future on programmatic as a whole and on the industry as a whole. So we have a couple of questions that have come in. Pete, do you want to maybe address the first one? So the first one we have is 50% media fee seems high for MightyHive. How do you guys justify that compared to your competitors in the space?
Yeah, so for us, 15% is just where we're starting, and that's when we, the folks at MightyHive, are absolutely doing everything, right? And, we didn't make these fees up. That's how much it costs us to kind of do business and, to make a reasonable profit around these types of things. As we've said before, very few of our customers actually continue to like it. We like to bring people into the place where they are actually doing the media buying themselves. And so it starts at the 15%, but it kind of moves down from there. And we actively push our clients to say, listen, right, we don't want to be the kind of outsourced focus for this. We want to teach you how to do it yourself. But if we are in the position at the early stages of the relationship where we're doing everything, then yeah, our fees are our fees.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. And just following up on that, we have a couple of offers for attendees and registrants today. Pete, do you want to explain the MightyHive offer a little bit as we go through it?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, basically, it's all we're saying is that if you're listening on the call today and you'd like to have a conversation with MightyHive, then reach out to us. My email address is pete@MightyHive, or you can email sales@MightyHive, and we'll waive the setup fee, right, for you guys, which is normally several $1,000s, and we'll just waive that, and we'll have a very short 60-day commitment, and we can go forward from there. And so it's no muss, no fuss. You can, we'll explain to you how this stuff works, and you can test out the performance on these things and see if you like it or not.
Awesome, thank you. Just from the Hannibal side, we have a white paper of 26 signs you need a new agency. It just basically gives some red flags that for in-house marketers who are currently managing a digital agency or any type of agency, just some tips to look out for as you start to evaluate your 2017 and plans, and ask questions on your agency, and what you should expect from a high quality team that you're working with. Just moving on, we have a couple of more questions that have come through.
Let's do the B2B one. That's kind of interesting.
Yeah, so how programmatic be approached for B2B, and what challenges have you come across when dealing with a big B2B established client with a programmatic approach?
Sure. So, let's start first with the general notion that B2B marketing is very different than consumer marketing because of the narrow focus that you're looking at. If you're trying to sell software to somebody or some sort of business services, the number of people that you need to hit isn't measured in the hundreds of millions or billions, right? Often it's measured in the hundreds or thousands. And so it's a very different type of thing. And I think that because of this fundamental issue, what you've seen in business to business marketing for a long, long time, and this I'm talking about decades and centuries now, is that a lot of B2B marketing has not been focused so much on advertising as it has been on PR, public relations, coverage from the trade rags or from general business magazines and events, conferences, so on and so forth. And that's really because up until recently, advertising was really kind of a non-starter for these folks, just because there'd be so much waste in the media buy. I think that there's a very famous quote from a gentleman by the name of John Wanamaker, who famously complained that 50% of his advertising was wasted. He just didn't know which half. And really what that meant was that, if he was buying a newspaper ad on the front page of the New York Times or a television ad, sort of more recently, at least half of those people, were basically a waste of time or a waste of money, because they had no interest in buying it, but because you didn't have granularity on this stuff, you really couldn't do anything. And so that's why probably every single person on this call has, tons and tons of brand awareness for products that they will never purchase. And that's a real mistake, because it was expensive to create that idea in your head, even though it was useless for the advertiser to do so. And that problem is writ large inside of a B2B execution, because it's not 50% waste, it's probably more like 99.999% waste. And so, because you're really kind of shooting for those individual specific folks that you want to advertise to. And so programmatic has really kind of gotten you, and PPC and others have gotten you to a place where you could target that group much, much more efficiently. And so there's things that you can do to just kind of say, I want to advertise to these, 100 people, or to these 500 people, and nobody else. Today, there's been a lot of exciting announcement that Google has made in the last few weeks, even and days, even, where they're talking about putting in search retargeting signals into their display targeting options, and so and that's a real kind of benefit and boon. So now we can take the those audiences that have been searching for very specific terms, like, I don't know, accounting software or something like that, and now it's not just the ability to hit those folks inside of a search ad that happens during the literal time on the page for the Google search engine, but now you can hit them on YouTube, and that's powerful.
Yeah, and I think you hit the nail on the head there. I think just the amount of data you're able to possess and integrate a cross-channel approach is definitely the biggest thing I have found would be to be with programmatic, like rather than essentially a spray and pray approach. You're able to segment and sub-segment different parts of your audience with different messaging, with a lot of external data that's validated, even internal data where you're able to go beyond just customer match, but be able to create really effective lookalike and DMP models to target towards. And yeah, I think that's definitely the best way to put it.
Absolutely.
So I think we have time for a couple more questions here.
Let's hit question 6 and question 5. I think we can kind of like kill two birds with one stone on that one.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's a good choice. So the GDN has a lot of poor inventory and poor publishers. Is it different on the programmatic side? How much and how come the supplies side publishers aren't passing through their data the same way the GDN is? And part two of that question, basically. And let's address part one first, and we can move on to part two after that.
Sure. So GDN has a lot of publishers that are suspect, and I don't work on the GDN, so I would, but certainly that inventory quality is always going to be an issue in any sort of environment like this, and MightyHive definitely takes active steps towards doing that. We keep active blacklists, and folks that we don't want to bid on or try to avoid, and will never bid on ever at all, and we can actually kind of share that amongst all of the folks that are participating through that with us. And so we are really kind of looking at it from the perspective of, let's all collaborate to kind of create these blacklists that could be, sort of the benefit, and it can be shared across all of our clients. That being said, I think that you have to acknowledge that this is a constant struggle. Right? Anytime when you're transacting in the dollar volumes you have to be constantly vigilant, because there's going to be a lot of crooks out there that are trying to do some stuff. And so, yes, it is an issue, and I think that MightyHive does it pretty good in addressing it. And we are out there and kind of every day proving that it's possible. That being said, the minute that we drop our guard is the minute that some bad things can happen. And so, absolutely, it's an issue, and we're always we're aware of it and trying to fight it. And we're, good news, we also have sort of the assistance of the publishers, the good publishers that are out there, and the Googles and the Facebooks, and all the advertising, the true sort of honest participants that have integrity in the general ecosystem, that are all trying to stamp out sort of the plague of these negative actors.
Yeah, and I think that's the biggest benefit I've seen when working in the programmatic realm, is you have all these integrations. It goes back to the one we're talking about that consolidation of, external partners working within one system, where you have vendors out there, they integrate with your display campaigns to eliminate, say, as much bot traffic or as much false impressions as possible. And there are solutions out there for search as well that are trying to fight that good fight in terms of saving your advertising dollars. And you pay, at times you do pay a small premium for that, but in the long run, you see the benefit of your overall spend as the campaign evolves and as your strategies evolve.
And I'll put in a couple more comments there. Number one is I'll draw the parallel between sort of trying to filter out the sort of the not as good impressions, if you will, which can be sort of just like outright fraudulent publishers, down to sort of non-viewable inventory. And yeah, those are both issues. And I'll come back to my earlier point that, and if you look at it from a certain perspective, then those are just kind of like spam filtering for media buying. And you don't want your spam, you don't want to, buy your spam filters separately. You just kind of want it to be part of the media buying product, and it just works. And you don't have to think about it. And yeah, the odd spam messages, going to creep through, but just like it does with, kind of Gmail today. But the real point here is that it needs to just be part of the overall platform, and it needs to be transparent and occurring in the background. And I don't I'm not really particularly interested in all the ins and outs of like how it works. I just want it to do its job and keep me from bidding on non-viewable and or outrightly fraudulent inventory.
Yeah, I think that makes total sense. I think it's the perfect way to address that. So maybe segue into the next, our final question for today. Um, what are your views on future conversions? I know we have a lot of clients who maybe value it at 50%. Industry standards sometimes view it as meaningless. I just wonder your thoughts on that, and maybe having that conversation before we finish up for today.
Sure. The truth here is that this is a highly, highly important topic. In my opinion, one of the original sins of advertising has always been that it has trouble with attribution, trying to really figure out which ad mattered and which ad didn't. And at the end of the day, any CMO and any CEO or any business owner is going to say, you know what? Here are the two questions that I want to know about my advertising efforts. How much did I spend, and how much did it make me? And the ROI better be positive, right? One number better be bigger than the other. And if you kind of go out and you ask if you're a CMO today and you ask these questions, you will know down to the penny how much money you spent. But if you ask all your vendors and all your folks, okay, so how much money did we make? Right? And then all these folks will go off and do their attribution studies, whether it be view through or last click or whatever. And something really, really bad happens because they'll take everybody's estimates and you'll add them up, and it's 10 times the actual revenue of the company during this period. So either the finance department lost 90% of the revenue somewhere, they just misplaced it. That didn't happen, by the way. Or, attribution is a really, really, really fussy subject, and it's a difficult thing to crack. Now, I think that there are tons of things that are impacted by this sort of fundamental inability for our entire industry to really kind of track these things. And one of them is, to kind of hit on things that we were talking about earlier, fraudulent websites and non-viewable inventory, and we have to do all these kinds of crazy things in order to kind of combat that. But if we had a true attribution signal, right, the ability to just say, yeah, here's how this is performing, not in terms of clicks or some other vaguely related proxy for success, but this is what actually happened in terms of it rang the cash register or it didn't, then you know what? You don't have to have specific solutions for viewability or specific solutions for, sort of click fraud or all those things. Because you know what a non-viewed ad doesn't do? It doesn't drive anybody to purchase. You know what a click fraud ad doesn't do? It doesn't drive anybody to purchase. And so naturally you'll start kind of getting rid of the stuff that's just not performance. And so from that perspective, yes, absolutely. View through attribution. Look, I will tell you on that specifics. Of course, view through attribution happens, right? Or should happen. Like, of course, you've seen an ad and you didn't click on it immediately, but it definitely impacted your willingness to buy it. But how do you measure that specifically? Right? Is it 50% or is it 2%? What's the window? And all those terms of art, right? That's hard. And so we need to come together to really figure out the science behind this stuff. And I think the key is really going to be measuring the actual sales impacts and doing that in a scientifically and statistically rigorous way. And then we can have a real conversation. Right now, when people are arguing back and forth between these things, really all they're doing is like, sort of, it's the 10 different parties who all have been asked to kind of justify their, they're all just jockeying to take more credit for for the effect of their buy so that they can say, look, that's why you should expand your spend with us.
Perfect. I think that's the great way to sum things up. Pete, you and I could talk about this for weeks and days on end, but unfortunately we're out of time. I would like to thank Pete. It's been great to hear your insights and talk, and thank you for everyone that's attended, all of your questions. If you have any follow-up questions, feel free to reach out to Pete at MightyHive.com or to Hannapin with any feedback or any further questions on how we can better serve your guys' needs. Reach out to marketing at Hannapin.com. Again, thank you guys and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you very much.